All right, Greg Minniear, Jackson County, deer killed with a muzzleloader, opening day of gun season. Gross score 157 and 5/8. So the story actually begins back in 2020. Actually 2019. We found his shed in 2019 on a fence row across the road from my parents' house where we were hunting. That was in 2019, and then 2020, October 1st, my mom, she goes, I was coming over to the house to do chores at their farm. She goes, hey, there's a big buck behind the barn here, bed down the doe. I said, okay, well, my opinion of a big deer and somebody else's opinion may be different. So I said, oh, let's go look. So we sneak out there, and I'm just in street clothes. And I picked the doe out on the edge of this old overgrown orchard, and I start scanning for the buck, and all of a sudden I see deer staring back at me down the fence row. And I see this tall frame like this staring back at me, which is really unique. And then he'd go back to look at the doe, and he would turn his head, and I would lose his sense of frame. Oh, it's not a bad deer. And then he'd turn back, oh, wow, that's a really big deer. So about 45 minutes into that interaction with him bedded with this doe at a distance, waiting for him to make a move so I could take a shot with my archery equipment, he kind of stepped at the doe and grunted and chased, and all of a sudden I turned to look to my right, and another 10-point came running into the same spot with him in this inside corner of this pasture and the old orchard. And I took the 10-point. I pulled up, drew, shot the 10-point. Everything went from there, and this deer ran on my life, as I thought at that point in time. We caught a glimpse of him for the rest of the season, through gun season, traveling back and forth to the property we're hunting across the street, but never got connection with him. So rolling into 2021, had trail camera out, and we caught the deer one time on October 26th. Came in after a horrible, horrible rainstorm, and he made 3 pictures of a scrape on a mock scrape we had, and gone. So first thing I said when we pulled the camera up on the cell cam, go, deer's gotta be 160. So we were looking at him like, gosh, he's gotta be so close. So he got nicknamed 160. Fast forward now to nobody saw him during archery season on our side of the road that we were hunting, and turn back around to opening day of gun season, anticipation, of course, of opening day of gun season. Father and I are sitting together as we do on every opening day because it's more about spending time together. And we had a young buck come in, and he cruised through with us and hanging there, chasing a doe. He leaves about an hour later, gunshots to the north, turn back around to hear this buck is coming back from us, this young buck that we were watching earlier, and he's gut shot. So I go ahead and put the deer down, and my dad and I are like, oh, it's karma, we call the neighbor, and they get their deer back. So due to that, I left the stand we were sitting in the cover to a food plot stand that has horrible cell phone signal, which comes into the play later. Sat there for the rest of the day on an all-day sit, and about 4:30 I switched, or about 4 o'clock I switched back to the other stand to get into the stand, and we were sitting there, no anticipation, no deer movement, nothing. After the guys had already got the deer out, I was like, oh man, they blew all the deer out of here, coming to get that deer with a quad. My wife calls me, and we're sitting there, and I really have to dedicate this to my wife, because she calls me and said, hey, we really need something in town. Can you go ahead and let me hunt it all day? Can you come help me out with this? And I said, yeah, not a problem, happy life, happy wife. So I'm walking out at 4:30, and I'm halfway up this mile-long back property we have to hunt. Walking through the center of it, and it's got hedgerows parting out perpendicular all the way through. So each field I get to, I glass a little bit as I'm walking slow out, and I get about halfway up, and my dad calls me. He had to go into work at noon, so he only got to hunt half of opening day. And he goes, you're walking out at deer 30? And I said, yeah, I gotta get some for Kayla, and I'm walking out. He goes, oh, I can't believe you're walking out deer 30. It's all right, it is what it is. No more than I hung the phone up with him, I stepped into the next intersection of the hedgerows, and I look up, and this doe is staring back at me, and I'm like, oh. So I try to make myself really small behind the only tree between us is this little walnut that's only 7-8 inches wide, and it's about 20 yards in front of me. And I'm taking my binos, and I'm just glassing each side of the tree, and I realize, okay, she's looking at me. Oh, there's some more deer to the left. There's more deer to the right. So I'm bobbing both sides of this tree, and I'm picking up, and I eventually counting like 7 or 8 deer in this little depression between me and them. And I look at her, and all of a sudden I see she rips and looks to her right really quick, and another doe shoots through the hedgerow that she's standing at, and she's scooting out like something was chasing her. So I lean back to the tree, and all of a sudden all I see is this pop up, and I'm, whoa. So I got behind the tree, zoomed the scope up on the muzzleloader, know I'm gonna have to make a shot at a distance, and cocked the hammer on the encore, and I slipped right up to the tree, and no more than I peeked around the tree, got the gun on him, and he's straight on, and I put it on the center of his chest, and I let him have it. And of course, smoke goes off, and all I see is deer running away. And I'm like, oh my gosh, adrenaline now hits me. I didn't have a chance to get excited. So I'm sitting there, and I pull my phone out, and I'm literally on 5%. Battery's dead due to where I was sitting because the cell phone signal was just killing my phone. And I called my dad, and I said, Dad, I just shot a big one. He goes, what'd you shoot? Which one? And I said, I think I just shot the 160. He says, reload, get over there and see. And I'm like, all right. Yeah, I said, okay. And I hung up the phone, and I reload the muzzleloader really quick, crank the scope back down, and I'm starting to walk to where he was at, and I didn't have time to range or anything. And I start walking across kitty corner across this field, and I'm like, all right, there's 100 yards, and I keep going a little bit. I'm like, there's 150 yards, and I'm getting closer, and about 10 yards from the hedgerow. And all of a sudden I just see the grass move. I'm like, oh gosh. So I hurry up and walk up and look, and he's sitting there, and he's trying to get back up, and I hit him straight on, and I broke his neck. So I just put another one to finish him point blank. And I get on the phone, and I call him. I said, Dad, I shot the 160, got a picture of him, and as soon as I hit send to the text message, my phone dies. So now I'm sitting there with a dead cell phone, completely by myself, the biggest deer I've ever shot in my life. And I'm freaking out. Didn't even get a chance to call my wife and be like, hey, I'm not gonna be able to run in. I just did this. So I left everything right there, set my gun down, walked back across the street. Of course, now you're just, I'm pumped. I just killed a big deer. So I walk over, plug the phone in the truck, letting the battery start charging, and the first text went out as the group text to my two best friends and my father-in-law and my dad. And I said, I got the buck. And all of a sudden it's like, boom, 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 boom. And my phone is just going off like crazy. And I'm sitting there it was so surreal all of a sudden, but then I'm also like, I'm completely by myself trying to get this deer out. So my mom's coming home from work as well, and she goes, well, do you need some help? I said, yeah. So she pulls in, she gets changed really quick. She goes out with me. She goes, well, where was it? And we're walking back in, pull the truck down, get some lights, and she's like, oh, I'll help you drag it. And my mom's 65, and I'm like, okay, Mom, how about you just carry the gun? I'll do the dragging. So we started dragging them out, and we got to that point and got some photos done. I thank my mom for that, because I'm not once in a lifetime kind of deer for me here in Michigan. So, but yep, that's the story of this buck, Jackson County.